So thank you all for coming. I appreciate you all, everyone being here. Seriously, it's like the summer months, so I genuinely do appreciate like people coming together and connecting on this. So this one is a little bit of a return to this kind of a mini series that I like to call like what can systems thinkers learn from insert topic here, basically. So we're going to talk about, I hope my Latin is good, Magnifica Humanitas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is any better? I like to read.
I looked at John like, maybe you're the Latin. Which is the latest encyclical from the Pope. If you, like me, don't know what any of those words are, we have Giancarlo here today, and he'll give us some context setting, and then we can have a discussion about what we can learn from that. But as we typically do in Systems Think Ontario fashion, we're going to go around the room, human room and virtual room, and in-person room and virtual room. Very briefly, you can just say what your name is, where you're coming from, and what brought you here this evening. I'll go around the physical room, and then I'll just go through some of the names online. So go this way.
Hello everyone, I'm Arun Joseph, a service designer with Sunlight. Nice to meet you all. I'm new to the world of systems thinking.
Yes, I forgot to go myself, but my name is Zach Khan. I'm a graduate of the Strategic Foresight Innovation Program, and now I co-host and organize these monthly sessions. I'm a systems enthusiast, and thank you all for coming. Back to Elena.
I'm Elena Leonard in Toronto. I've been involved in systems and cybernetics for a number of decades now. And I'm off to Brazil for the American Society for Cybernetics Conference, beginning of August, which is celebrating Stafford Beer's 100th anniversary.
What is your relation?
Okay.
Sorry. Stafford Beer was her partner.
Hi, I'm Anna B with extremely long last name. I am also an SFI, soon to be hopefully grad. I'm founder of the Canadian Center for Futures Literacy, and I found this wonderful group through, I'm pretty sure David, but I can't remember now. So that's it.
Hey, my name is Yashar. I'm doing SFI. At the same time, I'm doing management consulting. It's some kind of AI projects. I found SFI through David, Anna, and you, of course, through SFI program.
Thanks for coming.
I'm David Ng. I'm currently an adjunct professor here at OCAD University in the graduate school. And more relevant, maybe, I am now the president of the International Society for System Sciences, pro temp, which means that it's like I was president in 2011, 2012, and the organization needs some help, so I'm president again.
Everyone, my name is Ali Bukhari. I am in healthcare analytics, and I found out about this group through a shared group that Zaud and I are in. It's an online magazine, so I'm very excited to be here and to learn from folks.
Hi everyone, my name is Akhil. I used to work in climate tech for the longest time, and now I write a newsletter about systems change. And the reason I'm here today is because I'm intrigued about the role of faith in human life and systems change in general. And I heard about this from Jade. Cool.
Hi, I'm Jade. What do I do? I am grieving. I'm trying to get into grief work, and one of my recent explorations was the grief of AI. And I've been part of a lot of different spiritual, interspiritual communities, discerning how to respond to polycrisis and collapse metacrisis. So I'm very curious how we retain our sense of humanity as we transition time.
Awesome. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
My name is Nate. I also do a lot of random things. In the past, like earlier in my career, was more involved in community and spiritual leadership and religious leadership. And then coming out of that, found my way into strategic design and have been consulting for the last like 20 years. in different sectors in that space. Also heard about this from Jade, but I've been to other Systems Thinking Ontario meetups over the years and really appreciate the systems thinking community here.
Nice to have you.
My name is Kevin, and I do foresight at the Ministry of Energy and Mines. And, I came to one meeting like almost a year ago, but I haven't come back since. But I thought this topic was interesting, so I decided to come.
Which one was that? Was that the summer months? Like we were.
It was the one with Daniel Hoye and.
Oh yes, cytodynamics. That's yeah. Cool. Welcome.
Dania, I've been part of like kind of David's various undertakings, like specifically systems changes learning circle. And I attend these sporadically.
Thanks for coming. We're going to go to introductions to the online folks. Just really quickly, I'll call yourself out, and you can, for the online folks, if you can keep yourself muted, obviously unless you're chatting, just because our volume of you is very high in the room. So if you can stay muted, that's great. But then when I call you, yeah. So Don, if you can, we'll start with you, Don, and then you can flip back to mute, and then that might be good.
Sure. Yeah. I used to be a regular with this group, and I very much enjoyed the sessions. Fascinating field, systems thinking. And I'm actually working on a couple of publications right now. And if I didn't know anything about systems thinking, the effort would be a lot harder. I'm also quite concerned about complexity. It is obviously all around us. It's getting worse all the time, and we're not helping. Something like AI can be extremely enormous boon to us, or it can make things exponentially worse. I'm afraid at the moment it's heading in the second direction, and we're going to have to deal with that collectively or individually or both.
Awesome. Thanks, Don.
Okay.
Camille?
Hi, everyone. I'm Camille. I'm an experienced strategist, multidisciplinary, so I like to dabble in all different fields. I joined this group really recently, but I'm actually super excited about the talk tonight. I like good talk on any subject, so thanks for putting this together.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. David's Fathom note taker, just joking. Katrina.
Hi, I'm Katrina. I am a design strategist working in consulting. I'm also an SFI grad, and so I've been watching the group for a while, but this is the first session that I've joined.
Thanks for joining. Kelly.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I missed my bus, so I'm online. Thanks very much. As I think it was David that said, once you start thinking systems, you can't go back. So this double challenge, or the double topic that is on today, I really appreciate the contrast. I guess in the past, I've had the opportunity to challenge a Vatican Cardinal before, and I look forward to the topic and conversation tonight.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Kelly. Lise.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, recent SFI grad in my second career after spending 34 years in my first. And so this is the first of these talks that I have attended. The topic was just interesting, of course. Understanding perspectives on AI from different points of view is always really interesting and necessary. And so, yeah, thanks for the topic.
Likewise. Yeah, thank you for being here. Rose?
Good evening, everyone. I'm in Ottawa. I would love to be there in person, but it's kind of far for me to travel. I've joined a few of these sessions, always online, when you have them online, and I too am very interested in this subject. I thought the Pope, I'm Catholic, so I thought the Pope in doing this, it was really quite disrupting, but this is why I wanted to be here and see what everyone has to say about it. Thank you.
So there's a little bug, like Rose has her camera on to introduce herself, but we don't see it in the display, so I don't know. So you guys are in comparison to a holy voice from above. So I don't know how to fix that, but maybe on the next go, we'll get that a fix. But thank you, Rose. Nice to see you here. I can see Rose. We can't see her in the room. Next on the list is Sebastian.
Hello, everyone. I'm joining from Vancouver Island, BC. I used to be a service designer for the BC Public Service until my permanent residency application got in their way, but we'll let the union figure that out. I was an SFI graduate in 2021. I was taught by David Ng. I really enjoy this group, and I'm happy to be joining you online. So.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Sebastian. Last but not least, Tim.
Yeah, hi. My name's Tim. I've participated in systems thinking on and off for a number of years. So find it very interesting. And yeah, I thought this was a pretty kind of iconic publication, and it's generated a lot of discussion in other groups I've participated in. So when I saw that was the topic, I did want to see how it landed here and hear the speaker. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We were just doing introductions, and you're the last one. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Horace Chan. So I've been in this group since I don't know, in the starting. It was around 2016 or something.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's
pretty
been a while.
Yeah.
And so I'm an entrepreneur. I have a consulting firm dealing with business issues in terms of process improvement, etc. So I've been away for a long time, and I'm back in Toronto since last year. So that's why I chose to come back and see how everything's going.
Okay, great.
10 years later.
Yeah, we're hybriding now. We have this, and there's people online too.
Yeah, no. Even the platform online has improved. I remember at the beginning it was SharePoint.
Right.
Yeah, it was a SharePoint. Yeah, so it was kind of less flexible than this one.
Yeah. We'll have a whole systems thinking session on Microsoft and just.
So yeah, so if you have any question, feel free to ask.
Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Thank you for being back.
So the topic is what can we learn from Magnifca Humanitas? And we have Giancarlo joining us today. Why don't you start by maybe just sharing a little bit about yourself? Then I'll just ask a couple of questions, and from there we can just organically have a conversation.
So born here in Toronto, but grew up in Italy. Dad's Italian, mom's Colombian. Eventually made my way back into our Ontario schools, French immersion schools. So very confused for most of my schooling. But that actually would start a journey I didn't know at the time. I went to a Jesuit high school, which a lot of my formation I didn't realize came from there. I studied pure mathematics, computer science, statistics, University of Toronto. Thought I was going to go into the banking world as an analyst, but the world had other plans for me. Worked at UT's stats department. Got my bachelor's of education because I realized if I can graduate high school, which most of the teachers thought I couldn't, other kids probably feel the same way. And what if I help those kids think differently? And so there's something inside of me that kind of called me to that. I think the Jesuit formation helped. Spirit was always service of others. And so started my career 25 years ago in one of the first digital schools here in Ontario. There was 2 other ones, fully digital, with the lens of how might we look at education through a digital lens. Didn't know that was going to lead me to work with all the school boards in Ontario, helping them transition to digital. I got picked up by a company called Smart Technologies. They invented the Smart Boards, Canadian company. I was the advisor to the executive there for several years. They got acquired by Foxconn. If you don't know Foxconn, they're the 3rd largest company in the world, I think. They produce 46% of the world's consumer electronics. So most of the electronics you see in this room probably came from them. They were starting a division on enterprise and education, acquired a bunch of companies. Sharp is one of them, Smart is another one. As the advisor to the executive, my role was essentially keep pulse of what's happening in the world, how it's shifting societies, how it's shifting organizations, how it's shifting the nature of how we work and how we learn, and then feed that to the businesses so they can build products and services to help serve the communities they serve. So I worked a lot with government initiatives, so a lot of large-scale tech deployments, which were fascinating. Never really thought about getting to the science of systems thinking, which this group kind of pulled me into, but there's several folks that I kind of followed and were mentors along the way. And what happened about 10 years ago, noticed, so for context, China held the most patents in AI, but about 10 years ago. The way they deployed it was very strategic, very specific. Foxconn was very, so Foxconn makes all of Apple's products, for example, so I use Apple as an example since you both have devices. The way they manufactured their tablets and their iPhones drastically changed. Like the engineering world in Foxconn changed because of the sensors and what they were doing with mining the data that they got from it. And that led me to start exploring who else was doing this and what kind of disruptions would this lead to. So I went to MIT, there's a professor there who studies future work and change, and realized a lot of people were thinking about this and exploring this. So I started tracking it. So the report was on the wall about 10 years ago. It wasn't until about 5 years ago where I started my own consultancy, just helping organizations navigate to transition. To simplify it, there's 3 phases that any one of us and any organization goes through. As they navigate it, it goes from, I call it Ignite AI, which is once you become aware of what's happening in the world as it relates to AI, you become ignited. In other words, oh wow, I need to do something, or I feel something now and I have to act or behave differently. Either for my organization or for myself or for my kids if you're a family member. Second phase is how you start bringing it into your own world, how it starts, I'm not going to say affecting, but how it starts being integrated into your daily practices or routines that you had. And the third phase where AI becomes infused, whether you chose it or not, and that is where you start evolving. Organizations evolve, maybe for the better, for the worse. And so the work that I do is helping people and organizations transition through those, that as we evolve, we can feel good about how we're evolving because we have control over an agency over where that's evolving to. My connection to the faith is interesting for many, many years, 20 years of work I did in consulting. Never really tied the 2 worlds together, how much this was a big part of the work that I did. AI forces that connection, I would say, because at the core, whether we're an individual or an organization, in the absence, when things shift so quickly and an organization or system or country doesn't create guardrails to protect humans or societies or employees from themselves, then what drives decisions that you make? And that's a moral compass, right? And people's moral compasses come from different places. I introspectively, the work that I did, realized I need to have a very strong moral compass if I'm giving guidance to organizations and institutions. For context, most of the work I do is K through 20, so universities and K through 12 organizations, governments, school systems, but do work with mostly small, medium-sized businesses as well. And it's interesting, that lens of understanding where your moral compass is and using that as a guide becomes more important. So I actually got much closer to my faith thanks to AI as a result of AI, which is interesting. And the work that I do a lot is in translating a lot of the conversations and noise that's happening into something productive, into, well, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? When it comes to working with organizations of faiths, I've been asked to do a lot of work with churches, community groups. If you don't know the CWL, the Catholic Women's League, there's an organization in every single province I do work with provincially, but also at the national level. There's also Focal Latin, it's a faith-based group as well. They do community service work as well. And it's helping faith-based communities unpack how their faith is guiding them in this era of uncertainty or let's call it confusion, right? Because depending on what your feed looks like, you're either thinking AI is horrible and it should go away, or, oh my goodness, look at all the things that it can do for my sector in the healthcare, for example, right? And so it's translating, and the Vatican, I'll give some context from the faith-based place. So the Catholic community, We have Pope, who, you know, think of as the CEO of the organization, although that's a really bad analogy to use. And I'm not a historian, and I won't go into the history of the Catholic's role, the Pope's role, and yes, it's very intertangled with politics and government. But for the context of this conversation, what's important to know is, as Catholics, the churches and the organization that is the Catholic faith looks for guidance from different sectors. And in the Catholic faith, there's the Vatican and there's different dicasteries, which are different working groups that unpack different conversations. There's about 3 or 4 different dicasteries that have been unpacking how the world and how our faith encounters artificial intelligence. And they've been publishing a lot. And a lot of the documents, let's slip them simplistically into, if you're an organization, here's how you have to think about it. And if you're a layperson, like when you and I, here's how we should encounter it. Nothing has really hit the head, hit the nail on the head, so to speak. In December, they published something that was getting there, which was, if you're in healthcare, if you're an enterprise, if you're in education, if you're a parent, here's how you might encounter AI. So I thought that was a great push. But this encyclical that just came out was like, okay, well, let's put it all down. And if you had a chance to read it, the whole first half is around the historical context, kind of to give you context as to why the second half is, here's what we're going to do about it, right? And here's how we can take action, and here's kind of how we're calling. And so to understand why they're kind of driving us in this direction, you kind of have to have a sense of the historical lens. I'm not an expert on this historical lens by no means. My lens leads into the, well, what are we going to do? How do we encounter it? One thing is hide under the chair and pretend it's going to go away. That is the worst thing that we can do in an era of artificial intelligence. So excited to hear and learn from all of you, because it sounds like we have lenses from different walks of life and different experiences. And I love to hear kind of more, like I love to hear your lens, especially from a systems and organizational context, connected to my work lived experience, and see how that all meshes out as we have a conversation.
Well, thank you for sharing. I think you weaved in so many wonderful threads, like a little bit about yourself, your expansive, like a range of experiences, but also your faith-based relationship to technology and consulting, and how you had to be more morally grounded. I guess you did actually already address the setting the stage, like you kind of described that these different units were kind of giving different direction, but this is kind of a more of a complete one. Maybe just to play with the systems thinking lens, I'll start us off, and then as the conversation unfolds, we can get more questions. But there's this idea about the, I don't know, social doctrine of the faith and
constructive theory, or
and the background is set in context. And I know you just said you're not an expert on it, but maybe you can offer us a little bit of context, because in the systems concept world, we have this idea of like living systems, things that actually are ongoing. They are not frozen. There's a constant engagement with what is upcoming. How can we relate that if you provide some texture about that background?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So, and I'll give some context. So, should I unpack this? So, Pope, let's use his name. So the name he chose, so popes, what they do is they abandon their given names and they choose a name, right? So it's Pope Pius, he chose his name, Pope Pius XIV. That was not by accident. He chose it because the prior Pope Pius XIII was in the 19th century, the time of the Industrial Revolution. We think what was happening there in that era, what was happening? You have all these now workers, right, that are working for these factories. There was a conflict that was happening. So if you're the employee of a factory, you're like, how do I get more productivity and squeeze as much out of these workers, pay them low wages, treat them poorly. But if you're a worker, you're like, well, hold on a second. You got to value me as a human being and treat me like garbage, right? And there was an interdependence that existed that both sides weren't aware of. And so what a document that was very popular at the time was how, I'll just use in simplistic terms, how should we as society encounter this conflict where the employers and the employees are an interdependent system that rely on each other, right? If I'm a worker, I'm going to provide for my family. I need to know that I'm showing up somewhere, doing some work and getting paid a fair wage for it so I can bring that money back. If I'm the employer, it's like, well, I'm reliant on people that actually show up in the work, right? And so I can't treat them like garbage, because if I keep treating my garbage, which is better, they leave. And now I have nobody working for me and I can't produce. So the work that he did in that era was helping societies, both from the employer's lens and the employee lens, understand how we can navigate and coexist together. That is a very oversimplified way of describing it, but it's important to realize why oversimplified is, well, what are we experiencing now? We're about to enter the same kind of conflict. We're already starting to see it. Now, for a little bit of other context, as soon as AI started becoming more, I'll call it mainstream, or more people becoming aware of it, and it's not in society, but I'd say more in the business world, when businesses started adopting it. The Vatican and some of the dicasteries that were already looking into this realized we probably should get some guidance to these organizations because we're going down the path that we did in the 1900s. So how might we guide them, and especially our faith-based leaders, with encountering this? So they started doing these conferences, events every year that brought in kind of business leaders together. That actually led to the Rome call for AI ethics. Encountered it yet? So it's actually a call for businesses, and Intel was part of it. So several major companies are part of it on how do we bring in AI in an ethical way, where we value the human, value the work community and the environment that exists. And then since then, 23 other world religious leaders, I think it was last summer, got together and signed the Rome call for AI ethics. And the spirit of that is, you see what's happening, even though it's happened in the past in a different way. How might we as religious organizations internationally help guide organizations in their decisions that they make to bring it in a way that values humanity and helps serve everybody and not just serve some, and do what we've done for many, many, many generations, suppress those that usually most vulnerable. So that's the kind of the context, the back end of it. And so the encyclical that just came out is a way of tying all these different pieces together, right? And kind of making a stance like, here's how we should be thinking and approaching it. And you could, if you're an organizational leader, you look at that lens, but also as individuals, there's something that you also do.
So not only have they been more recently giving guidance on AI, but this even echoes historical precedent of having commentary in a time of like social kind of ethics around the workplace, even going back to the 19th century. It kind of echoes where we are in the present. Therefore, there's continuity, you're saying, there's continuity to this work in that time. And so kind of going into the actual substance itself of it, and I know you're really interested from an education perspective, maybe you can give us a sense on what are some of the themes that it touches on actual guidance and what ought we do. And there's sort of this framing that's woven throughout the piece about the two stories from Genesis, I believe, about the Tower of Babel and the building of the Jerusalem wall. Maybe just to give you a little challenge, and as you're sharing these components and themes, can you maybe tie in what the Pope is referring to and how are we to understand that reference?
Yeah, and I think so. I have very strong opinions about what the message should be. So maybe I'll start there, and that might open up a conversation. Only because what we're getting in the media of what's contained in the encyclical is very narrow, right? So when you unpack all of that, there's a doom and gloom story. There is a death and destruction, and everything is going to go horrible because we're going to make poor decisions. 100%. But there's another side of it which is around. So here's what we could do. And I want to focus on this one part, which is very clear on it, which is we are all, everybody in this room and everybody online, every citizen is called to take action. And so I use the analogy of being a creative, right? So we're all called not to be passive consumers of AI, but to be active creators in an era of AI. What does that mean? Oversimplified. See the situation like it is. And then there's 5 things that Encyclical talks about in terms of taking action, but it's see the situation like it is, see it better than it is, then make it like you see it. Right? Simple definition of what it means to be a creator. And what I think the spirit of the stories that were mentioned there, it's sometimes we see the situation like it is and we think we're making it better, but it's too narrow-minded and maybe it's just serving a few, not thinking about serving all. So I could do something that brings value to me, but you become the negative bystander of it. And so collectively, it's not better. And so what I think the main point and the main message that I would say if everybody takes away and puts into practice, it's we cannot be passive consumers. We have to be active creators in the era of AI. And that means all of us are called to look at the circle that we live and work in and ask ourselves, what's the situation that I see? How do I see it better? And how do we make that a reality? Now, if you come from a place of faith, most people places of faith are doing to others as you have done to you. It means you don't do things just to serve yourself. You do things to serve the betterment of the communities, your families, the organizations that you serve. So that I would say is like the main punchline that if we all took away and then had a discussion around like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, sure.
What do we actually do as a result?
Yeah.
Because that's the hard part.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
I actually found that part about there's a really interesting section that actually goes against a type of pragmatism that comes with cynicism or skepticism that it was critiquing. And I found that really interesting because like there's a sort of pragmatism or a realist view that starts to look at the outcomes of, for example, violence or coercion as being sort of, paramount to having things away, and what they're trying to encourage is a different framing of what that means and not just like kind of surrender to that. So I found that really interesting. But
the language that you use, right?
Yes,
So it talked a lot about, we have to pay attention to the words we choose to describe around the era of AI. I know we were just talking with Jade. Jade, was it really? Right? Like, and maybe we can do this exercise for everyone, just for fun. I'm going to ask you a question, and one of three answers, and the question's around the urgency you feel to either understand AI or dive deeper into what AI means for you as a person or the institution that you work for or the organization that you're involved with. And here are the three options. Not important right now, could wait 1 or 2 years, or needs immediate action. That's why I'm actually in this room today, right? Just out of curiosity, like what's the level of urgency that you feel AI is bringing to you, to the work that you do, or to the organization that you're in?
I feel it's urgent. I all three and neither, but I feel like it's not the right question to ask in this particular
context. Okay, I'll give you the context as to why.
No, it's fine, but I think the nature of this group is a little different, but urgent, but not really. There are other things also to worry about.
I think it's some kind of urgent for some people. It's not urgent for others.
Yeah.
It's some kind of, I feel that you're in the middle of transition. And, the reason to do something so that everyone needs to collaborate, to co-create this thing that's coming, I think it's not possible somehow. So for the people who can create something, it's urgent. For other people, it's
How
not
about for you?
Sorry?
How about for you?
For me, I'm just feeling an observer.
Depends on the day. Depends on the day.
Depends on the day. Sunny days,
The context that you're in.
or
I'm totally immersed. And I'll give you the story about how immersed I am. So I'm using Quen, which is a Chinese AI, and I'm using it to bridge between Western medicine and a TCM practitioner. And so I just saw a Chinese doctor. It's like I have a high blood pressure, and so it's like, okay, now I'm going to go back to the doctor, my family doctor, and say, this is what the Chinese say about the treatment, and I want to see what you have as a response for it. So I'm totally immersed.
On a personal level, I think it's quite urgent for myself professionally and personally to understand, get a grasp of it, and kind of be in that creator framework. However, I think there's always going to be that sliver of places where AI is not really applicable. But I still think it's important overall, collectively, to understand its use cases and its different, how it can support certain initiatives and not others. But like you said, I think there's always going to be that chunk of people that it's not necessarily urgent for. But for myself personally, I would say it is urgent.
Needed to do something 3 years ago. That's how urgent I think it is.
You need to
We needed to do something like 3 years ago. That's how urgent I think it is.
relate. It's urgent, relate.
Also feels quite urgent, but I'm often reminded of Bayo Akamolafe's quote, "When times feel urgent, maybe slow down." So I worry about the nature of reactivity and want to be very conscious. And I'd like to slow down and more consciously relate to like which systems feel ethical, how do I not deteriorate my brain, and be very thoughtful about it. And then systemically as well.
There's an urgency of the thoughtfulness.
Yeah, but it feels like we can't just be like, quick, it must be done now. Like there has to be some deep listening to the whole.
I agree with that. I feel like I almost get an allergic reaction every time the word AI is used as a word because it just hides all the truth of the questions of what we're talking about. It's like linguistic foreclosure. You know, we're not clear. Are we talking about stochastic? Or we're talking about machine learning? Like what are we talking about? Are we talking like what conversations do we want to have? So it's urgent that we're with this present moment of technology and society, social change, ecological change, you know, organizationally from a business perspective, absolutely. But so many policies and organizations and in governments just get shoehorned in the same way we've been doing for generations with every fad of everything. And we're in the worst moment of that kind of linguistic foreclosure and political capture and discursive capture we've ever been in globally. And it's entirely masked by two letters. And that to me is like the biggest bullshit moment we've ever experienced on the planet. The technology is interesting.
We've been there before.
No. We haven't been able to target kids with the voice of their dad on a drone before. We've never been in this moment where at scale we can exert coercive violence anywhere in the world in less than a week. So we have to acknowledge we're in a different moment than we've ever been in before.
Yeah, personally, like, I don't think it's like super urgent because when people try to, usually when everybody's saying something, saying A, I usually like go the other way. So it's just my contrarian sort of attitude towards life, I think. And I still like try not to use AI. I use like when I type stuff on Google, like the AI results come up. That's not really my choice. But like just in terms of the organization that I work for, in terms of the world of energy, you know, AI is like a super urgent topic. Like last week I was reading a Goldman Sachs analysis, like in the next 5 years they modeled, they project like $7.3 trillion going, or 7-point-something trillion dollars going into AI infrastructure over the next 5 years. So, you know, like that's like, I think that's unprecedented. That might be like what it was like when the pyramids were getting built. So I'm wondering like what the archaeologists of the future will see when they see all of these data centers, these husks of metal and concrete. So it's both urgent and non-urgent.
I'm gonna answer, so not in a linear way. So you asked whether the urgency you feel to understand AI or your urgency around AI. So I'm gonna combine two concepts. So the urgency around ethics is so urgent that I pivoted my successful, very prominent career 6 years ago to attend to the ethics in this world. And AI in terms of impact. So, you know, like you mentioned, Pope chose his name specifically because it was industrial revolution. So there were different things happened, and there are people who talk about AI like a very pragmatic thing. Oh, you know, we had computer disrupting the world, we had the phone disrupting, we had the electricity disrupting the world. This is not the same. This impact is as exponential as industrial revolution and how we are still actually living what we have done then to the way how our systemic problems in the society are. So the urgency is extreme, I think, from 16, I've been on this journey for 17 years when people looked at me and they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. We have no problems, everything is great. And now it's really urgent because we are behind. So unless we really put some guardrails on a governmental and as well as like you said, we actually shouldn't be victims, passive observers, but active participants, or this is gonna like take over sort of like define, like whatever the systemic problems we already have in society, this is much more exponentially how it's going to be really evolving from now. So for me, the urgency is the ethics aspects of AI. So AI could be a powerful tool to serve us. But if the bots and however we design it, how we define what we are making it use and how governments and companies are making decisions is going to make it or break it, whether we are the slaves or to it or the other way around.
I totally agree in terms of ethics. But in the same token, I would like to add the fact that it's very urgent. The MHE is like we are way behind already, because what we have facing right now, it was already in the labs, I think like 10, 20 years ago. So they are continuing to improve as well, the different model, different approach, and we have like Mr. said, China is coming into this space as well. We don't have any control as well. So in terms of collective maturity facing the new tool, we need really to have, to gain some knowledge in terms of how we can get into decision-making process. We don't have that right now. And at the same time, we don't know what's going to happen in the next few years. Yeah, we all blind. So what does that mean? That means that we always in short. We don't have any knowledge. For some, I think there is some certification right now given by Claude or other organization who help us to get a sense of limits, frameworks, understanding those AI hallucination, those type of things. But I think 90% of us don't even know that some part of the virtual information they're getting is a fraud. It's not real. So how we can bridge the reality and the virtual reality. So that's where we are behind, and that leads to the ethics part, that leads to the knowledge as well, and also the technical part as well, because there's a different approach in play right now. Me as a consultant, I know that business model for companies are completely changed. So I'm getting into design thinking just because of AI. Before it was not relevant that much, but now it is, because the impact is so drastic. So you can have the ledger to let it go. That's why it's really, really urgent, because at some point, and that's why we need to understand, are we becoming slave of a tool, or we want to become master of this tool? Yeah. But in a collective way, not just individual, because there's individuals who know how to code, how to approach the tool. But I think 99% of us don't know how to code, Python, those type of language. We even don't understand that. So we need to, as a community, understand how we get into a better maturity level.
What is the basic that we need to understand so that we can at least make a decision about what it means to us and to the work that we do to that?
I think the framework and the approach, we need to have like vulgarization of how those different models get created and what kind of algorithm they use. Those frameworks need to be more transparent. Even if we say that there is a open source type of model, but even with those open source, I don't know if most of us even understand what does that mean. Okay, so me, I'm educating myself a lot. Every day I pass some certification already, but it's not enough. I think last week they were talking about how to get into Python, because it's not enough to know just the limits and the framework of those models. So what does that mean? That means there's more to come, because if they ask you to understand more about coding, about those type of tool. Has been something coming and we don't even know.
Do you want to manage the online folks? Sure. We can do it through a chat just quickly. Or
Well, I don't know if we'll get through all of them, but maybe there's a purpose of the
there's a
exercise.
reason, yeah, there's a reason for the exercise.
What I'll do is I'll give my voice up to Rose, and then we'll finish back with Arjun, and then we can not conclude, but you can share the purpose of the urgency exercise. So Rose, why don't you go ahead?
No, thank you. That was very kind of you. So interesting question, and I've been listening to everyone, so glad to go last. For me, AI is there, and I read the encyclical without the subject of AI. This is all about the urgency about the human condition. So, for example, we're drifting. We're not choosing, many of us, for various reasons. Power is concentrated. So what's the accountability as a society? Many of you talked about ethics. So, individual ethics, organizational ethics, you might call it moral authority. Economic systems, for example, are rewarding efficiency over flourishing. So what AI is doing is highlighting these gaps in our human condition and in our society, and it's making these trends go faster, wider, and becoming harder to reverse. So anyway, I don't, we have lots to discuss here, but that's where I find it interesting that we've come to. Thank you.
Do you want to share, or do you want to? Okay.
Yeah, I'll just quickly share. So for me, it's urgency at two levels. I say two levels, professional and personal. When I say professional, I work in an insurance organization where risk aversion is seen as a religion. And I work on work projects where automation and AI has to be delivered quickly. So there's this constant tension between that risk aversion strategy and let's go at speed. And so I'm part of that wonderful project. And personally, I'm using AI to disrupt myself so that I don't want AI to take my job. So I'm kind of running some scenarios. I run experiments to make sure that what is it that I can do that AI cannot do. So I would say, I'm kind of really working hard to make sure that AI does not beat me, so that I have some sort of a job in the next few years.
Thank you all for being so candid with your shares. And the purpose of the exercise is to hear the diversity of what we just answered. It's three possible simplistic answers, and some of you went further than others. But the interesting thing is I've been asking that question to organizations and the people individually, and I make sure leaders ask all their employees a series of questions. Why? Because you need to hear the collective voice. And then you start to see patterns and uncertainties, but also certainties like here's my action, right? And when you take the time to listen to those, it tells you stories. Now, here's one story that I've noticed over the last 3 years. We're as societies, and this could be in an organization, like a business, it could be in a school system, it could be a faith-based community, and even globally when they do these national studies, how are we doing as society? Well, we're getting even more divided. Maybe it's no surprise to us, we've been doing that already. But what's happening is the world is going into two different camps, into this is possibly good for me, but I'm gonna have some safeguards and some like worries about it. But there's some area of green growth here. And then the other 50% is get this thing away from me, right? And people are starting to get even more convinced as to which camp they fall into. Now, whether that's good or bad, I'm not gonna, that's good, but I'm just telling you, this is what I've noticed happening in the last 3 to 4 years. Where does that matter in an organization? Not paying attention to those things ends up surfacing when you're trying to move in a direction. Let's say with insurance company. My sister is an actuary, so it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I see it in an organization, right? So not paying attention to the sentiments of the people that are in organizations around. Let's use a simplistic scenario about the urgency. What does this mean for me and my work? What does the urgency mean for me in my life? Because you can hold two different opinions. Changes behaviors. So they're tied to beliefs. And if we don't pay attention to what those mean, then what happens is we have a disconnect between where we're trying to head. So if an organization really wants to do the right thing and bring in AI ethically, with a moral lens, to add value, productivity, business growth, but also value employees, that's the end goal. A lot of business actually trying to get there. But there's a disconnect between the approach they're taking because they're not paying attention to the sentiments of the people that they need that are actually doing the work to help them get there. Right? And so the exercise is important because regarding, and it goes back to the encyclical, which is what are we all going to do about it? How are we called to take action? We first have to start with ourselves to ask ourselves, well, what's my beliefs, my behavior, where am I sitting right now? Where is my sphere of influence, either personally, my family, or my loved others, or in my business sense? And what does that mean? What am I going to do? What's my next step based on what?
So I think in a systems language setting, we might say that the variety of our responses is a demonstration of us casting different boundaries and defining the range of how it impacts us in a whole bunch of ways. And your point is that we need to look at the whole. And that's, again, a systems aspect of it.
I actually think Rose brought up something that is far more interesting to talk about in the sense that this piece was written, worldviews of the iceberg, right? Because that's really what, to me, and I haven't read it all, I died somewhere halfway through, but that's what really is actually calling out, right? Not that AI in its own is not a problem. It's the problem of what is it actually solving, what are we bringing for, and there's multiple convergences of the things that are taking place. And I think if I understood what Rose was saying, if I remember it correctly, what she's calling out and what was quite interesting was there a very specific set out a way of looking at the worldview and where we're all actually going as the humanity. And also, are we anticipating for emergence, not in a systems thinking way, but in a Ralph Miller's way, which is similar but not, or are we anticipating for the future? And I think a lot of the conversations that we're having, we're anticipating for the future as if this is here, where this is how we can act or not act, but we're not having enough conversations about what is the underlying worldviews that I think it is coming to the time to change. Because the path that we're on with AI, without AI, with the technology, without technology, and all other things, maybe it's not the right path. And I would be curious to hear your thoughts on those aspects, because Babel Tower did come out there and a couple other things, right? I thought it was an interesting way for the church, Catholic Church, to reassert itself.
So I'm just going to get the queue going. So Anna's Q1, then we'll go to Sebastian. Sebastian, I'm going to go in reverse order. We'll get you up. And then we'll actually go up to Tim, because Tim looks like he actually wrote quite a bit, and I feel like there's some relevance there. So Anna, Sebastian, Tim.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you wanted to just open the floor to the conversation.
It is open, so if anyone has a bill, it's always hard to if you have a bill, you want to throw something into that point, go for it. But if it's a new thread, maybe just queue up.
I love it if people have it's like, this topic is hot, right? It's hot, and I want to make sure everybody had a voice even in that one, because we all have a different lens about the urgency and importance to all of us. And so we'll feel free to interject if someone has a strong point about.
Yeah, and I think somebody in the chat, because now it's done and I can't see it, but they wrote something that might be actually quite close to this. If they want to jump in and add on, it's fine too.
That was Tim.
Was it Tim? I don't know. Can't see it now. Anyway.
Why don't you? Yeah. I can't scroll. I can't control that one. None of us can control that one.
Sebastian, you want to go?
No. I think. Do you want to pick up on Anna's question, Giancarlo, about worldviews, and then we can go to Sebastian, and others can jump in as well.
Yeah. So. So as a comment, and I'll pick up on what you said about the comment Rose made, and I'll use COVID as the example, right? So COVID, and so with things like COVID happen and things like AI, and like you mentioned, they're very different, right? They're very different in terms of what's going to happen, but they're similar in terms of disruption, right? They often expose elements of society that are already present, that they were either there, we're aware of them, or they were dormant, and we just didn't choose to pay attention to it, right? So the same is already happening with AI in terms of how societies and different cultures are encountering it and bringing it into their lives. I think the biggest disconnect that we have right now is that the companies who are creating it are even creating papers to guide governments on how they should encounter it. See where that is the problem. And there's communication, I would say, that's being given to societies around how they should encounter it, or organizations should be encountering it. Maybe not, I'm not going to say absent, but it's centered around the lens of productivity, and which always comes down to the expense of individuals in societies, and specifically disadvantaged groups. And I think tying to what encyclical is trying to pull out of it is to say, in an era where we're trying to optimize, like your example, right? So we're trying to optimize productivity gain by using this tool to get us greater growths at reduced costs. What it means is we try to optimize every individual human. So I need you to do what you did, but do it as if you have a team of 20 people. That's basically now people's. So if you look at my neighbor works for the federal government, and he's a director there, that is a line item on his yearly scorecard for his bonus. So is it for his managers and his frontline staff. Show me how you have increased productivity as a director's office. And so now each individual becomes something that needs to be optimized. Well, what if you have disability, or what if you're not as productive? Well, you're no longer relevant. And this is something that's kind of a dormant reality that we're all about to encounter, that the encyclical does a good job kind of unpacking to realize we still have to value every single citizen in our communities, and realize that a place of work is still a place where people find themselves, right? Through community, through sense of purpose, and that's about to be deteriorated. So different cultures and different countries, different organizations are either talking about it or either taking action. So I go back to what are we doing about it? So some organizations are actually building communities, or a person's role around the ethics around how we bring AI. And they're looking at policies and practices and the undocumented, untangible byproducts of what it's doing to an organization. That's the minority, not the majority. And then some companies have created these roles and have since taken them away. You pay attention to, like OpenAI, if you look at their ethics, if you just follow the journey of that whole department that did that work, that's why Anthropic got created. The sister that created Anthropic, they left. A lot of others left because they started noticing that those pieces of the organization that were put in place to put in safeguards were slowly being dismantled.
Yeah. So, just to bounce back on your say, I'm a process specialist, and when I see the way companies use the AI revolution, it's more a linear thought. It's more a linear approach. They don't think about the organization and the ecosystem as a whole. And so that's why you have every time, some failure happening. So you have, we say, oh, we target this department, and we say, oh, we're gonna implement some AI tool, agentic AI, whatever, and we see how it goes. Instead of going back to their proper business model, and understand, okay, what are the opportunity of redesigning based of key factors, meaning can be human-centric. That's part of some companies, that's what we're doing right now. Before implementing AI, they want to say, okay, the human is part of what we represent. So how we can design something more human-centric.
And that there's a study that came out, 80% of businesses, they noticed, have adopted from that first way that you mentioned, very linearly.
Yeah, very linear. And so that's why when we talk about system thinking, system dynamics, etc., I remember back then I was working for City Hospital, and I introduced an approach to improve the overall hospital based on the system dynamics. But I was too early. It was really, really early. It was around 2015, 2016. And that's how I joined this group. Because I was like, yeah,
I can understand it.
I need to bounce back and understand how I can leverage the tool. Because when I was, because I learned system dynamics in close to MIT network, and so I thought I would be able to do something. But now with AI, it's pretty well relevant to use system dynamics, because that gives us a way to understand any system as a whole, not just processes, departments, etc. So that's how to bounce back to what you're saying. The light we have is we have too much a linear thinking than a system approach in order to leverage AI as a whole, without forgetting the ethics part, etc., etc.
There's just been some hands up online, so we'll take both. Like instead of going one by one, we'll take both of them in, and then we'll integrate it, and then we'll go back. So we'll kind of jump back and forth. So Sebastian, why don't you share your point, followed by Don? Actually, in your intro, Sebastian, your volume was low, and Don, your volume was high. So just maybe some of those adjustments. But why don't we take both of those in, and then we'll add those to the conversation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
still
that's
low?
better.
Okay, so I have a lot of opinions on AI, but my point here was that currently this year, we are expected to live through one of the worst El Nino effects in 100 years, which means that the planet is warming and maybe runaway climate change is getting out of our hands. So it doesn't really matter if the tool is useful or if it's ethical, if the construction of these data centers is going to destroy the conditions for life itself, right? And then we have to consider that what we are experiencing as AI is a consumer tool, right? It's a little game that lets us create fake text and fake images, but it is also a military technology. So these data centers are being built for the use of that military technology and surveillance.
So those are the 2 points. So one is climate change, the role of the impact of that and its relevancy to this conversation, and the military history related to AI and the consumerness of it now. And then Don, let's add yours as well on that. Don, you're on mute. I can, and then you have to have Don, because I think David, you turned off his mic. So Don, 1 second. Neither can I. Don, can you?
Muted. I can't do anything from the side.
Hey Don, anything on your end, on your screen? Weird. Oh, really? So now it says allow mic. Don, why don't you give that a shake, see if anything changed on your end if you click on mute.
Maybe while Don's figuring out how to unmute, I could address even Camille's reaction to that.
Yeah.
And then Don, just jump in when your mic's working. And I'll tell it in form of story. So my cousin in Italy, I was just there for my grandmother's 100th birthday. She just graduated her master's in environmental sciences. And I asked her about her encounter with AI in her studies. And even now, she's applying to different jobs, right, with the government. And her perspective and lenses of hesitancy, reluctance, and avoidance. So very little experience, very little exposure, and her perception of it is one that, keep this thing away from me, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want nothing to do with it. And over the course of the 2 weeks, we now meet weekly, by the way, because if there's anybody who needs to be more involved it's people like her who studied the environmental impacts of past technologies, of past societies, and where we're headed into the next phase. So Camille, to your perspective, right? It's and Sebastian, to your point, and I'm no expert in the environmental impacts. I've read up on what is happening, and if you just look at the data in Canada, the number of data centers we have right now and what they're forecasted, like plans in place, but funding for data centers, the impact is real, right? So it's coming. Now, what does that actually look like in terms of the impact to our communities and the environment and societies? Question mark. There's people that know more of that than I do. The reality, the point that I like that you made, Camille and Sebastian, that you brought up is, if that's your sphere, your circle, your area of expertise, we have to ask ourselves, well, what is the outcome that I want to make people aware of, per Camille's point? And is it to bring society aware of it? Then what can I do? Could I host something, a communal conversation around it because I have an expertise in it to bring awareness? Or should I be, because I have more of expertise, getting involved in the government and lobbying? I'll give you a perfect example. And we just saw it with, if you don't know, Canada has a minister dedicated to artificial intelligence. There's a department dedicated to artificial intelligence. The way that we're organized in Canada, and we're well respected internationally in terms of our approach to AI, more from a research lens than an application lens. But there's one thing that came out of the documentation and a new bill that's being passed on safeguards, specifically with children. I'll use children as an example, right? So we already know that certain students use, anybody under the age of, why I say youth, when you're under the age of 18, your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. So your ability to make rational decisions is not the same as all of us in the room. Now, we see this with licenses, use of alcohol, drugs, owning firearms. We put these safeguards in place because of this age thing. We already have evidence from MIT and Common Sense Media. We published a study on what happens when you let youth engage with AI. It's a friend. And you start engaging in romantic conversations. By the way, we're not going to do this question in the room, but if I asked you how you use AI, the number 1, 2, and 3 uses of AI around the world is to have these types of social interactions and conversations, sometimes in a romantic way. Now, if you're a youth, you don't know what the limit is, it usually leads to bad things. I'll just put it in short. We know this already, so now we're trying to put in bills to safeguard humanity from themselves. Now, I do parent talks across Canada on this topic, and there's a lot of parents that feel like we need to do something about it, but it's one thing to voice an opinion and another thing to take action and lobby to your government, right? Or get involved with groups that can do that lobbying. And so I'll tie in the comment of Camille reacting to Sebastian, which is, if we have a domain expertise area of interest, and this is something we feel strongly about, then the question is, how do we take action? Like, what are the areas to take action, or who's already taking action that we can be connected to get more involved and get informed? Or like the story of my cousin, her choice was to stay unemployed and just not get involved. And she can't be part of the conversation. She can't be part of creating solutions. So now she realized that, is now starting to get informed, starting to connect with researchers around the world. Realized Italy's doing quite a bit as it relates to using AI for environmental impacts and doing the lobbying as well for these big data centers. So I think that's a interesting reflection that kind of calls us back to the purpose of the encyclical, which is hopefully a takeaway from this group, is what does that mean for me? Each of us.
Let's take two. There's 2 or 3.
You invite Don again. I think Don may actually.
Don, let's come back to, because we haven't done in person in a while, so we'll come back, give that some time. So, Elena, does anyone else have? You had something you want? So, Elena.
I'm back online, by the way.
Back. Okay. Welcome back, Don.
No, I had to unplug my earphones. Can you believe that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, I'll say this. The advice I give to everybody here is to learn as much as you can about AI, use it as much as you can. Things are going to change after the bubble bursts, and it will. There's way too much. It's much too hot a market. It's going to explode. And a lot of people are going to be knocked right out of the park, and it's going to be open season. And then they'll start to listen to other people, other voices. It's understandable that you think it's urgent and are panicking because it's coming for your jobs, frankly, as much as possible. Now, these are pipe dreams, though, as we all know, and as apparently the Pope knows as well. But what he doesn't seem to appreciate is how cynical most people are and how unlikely they are at this point, when frankly scientific realism has taken over all the public space and sucked up all the oxygen, and people don't believe in an afterlife. They don't believe in supernatural things. Well, they probably shouldn't, but they should realize that there are other means of communicating than the obvious ones, and that what humans can do is particularly effective and powerful. And though we can do more with what's online, we haven't learned how yet. It's a brand new technology, and we still stare there like people stared, like corpses when they first took pictures of them in the 19th century. We don't understand how to use it properly yet, but we will. Unfortunately, there's going to be some problems in between. It's going to be rough waters. I can't see how we avoid it.
Okay, so meta crisis is one point weaved into technology use, like the lack of meaning, etc. So let's hold that one in the discussion plot. We'll add Elena's and we'll add your use as well.
Well, I'm kind of concerned about how we can keep AI from implementing or amplifying bad actions. One of the issues when Mythos was introduced to only a limited group of companies was that they figured out that, a bunch of middle school kids could sit around the table and take down a city's electrical grid without even really planning to do that. And so I think it's enhanced the possibility of unintended consequences, mistakes, and it's amplifying the transactional nature of everything. And I'd like to end with the comment from Simone Weil, which is that it's evil when humans are treated like machines and machines are treated like humans.
Okay, so the ethical role again, and then add something.
Yes, I just wanted to connect a few threads. So to me, the ethics, I just wanted to expand, if I didn't define it properly, it's like about fundamental values. So going back to what Pope written, and actually just to clarify, I'm atheist. I believe in God, and I'm not with Catholic Church, but it's very interesting how his paper is very much fitting exactly in my hugest concern in the last, decade or more than decade. So the thread is ethics is not just, so there's levels. So we're sitting in the system thinking group, right? So there's systems, ecosystems, and high complexity. And we're reckoning now with like AI as an example. So I think his paper, in a way, how I would read it, is actually he's making an argument, but he's applying it to AI. But actually that argument is applicable to climate change and how we in general have designed our societies. On many levels, and then break down the levels. It's like there's an individual level, like a human, each human, what values we carry. But we are all integrated, interconnected with other 3 levels I'm going to mention, or like, I don't know how many, I'm not going to be able to mention everything, but some. And then everything is a feedback loop. So you're not just your own individual, you're part of the society, you're part of the organization. So organization first, if you're working, and then society and whatever groups you're serving, and then the educational aspect. And then there is, like religion or whatever society, concrete country value systems are. And then you have the government layer, and all of that is actually feedback loop and integrated. So the example I want, so I wanted to connect different, thought like kind of threads here. So the ethics to me is not just ethics of, hey, I said something to AI and made shit up. That's like a low level of it. I'm talking about like how the coders, how these companies, so your example, OpenAI, I for a fact know because it's actually some family relation, sorry, that when they created, when Elon Musk and Ilya Sutskever, they created the company, they specifically created the OpenAI in order to be in a good balance to all this unethical AI. And then look where it went. Why did it go that way? Because they still live in a system and they still need to create profit. And then it's very difficult. And then you have humans in the company that also wear their value moral compass, right? And I'll give you one more example. So I was born in Russia. I was born in communism, and I left on a scholarship to study in the United States. And I came back within 3 years, and my friends have changed. So talking about here were the values that were propagated for 70 years, and it took 3 years to completely dismantle them. So I think we underestimate this aspect of how we all said drifting without any sort of like we're passively drifting, yet around us, very fundamental value things change. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to be too late. By the time it's going to just completely sweep us away. And there is no human left in this.
What is it to be human? What does it mean to be human, at least to you?
I think right now I'm not talking about what is it to be human. I'm talking about sort of this, like I've been on the journey for 17 years. So AI or climate change, I mean, climate change was here already, but AI was not as pertinent. But being a consultant for like Fortune 500 and private and large, small companies all over the world, like in 3 continents, I saw the same patterns.
But so I'm going to circle back because I think we all, as if all societies, in my opinion, have all wrong conversations about AI, generally speaking, which is fundamentally should come down to what are we trying to get out of the progress, right? What does it mean to be human? Which maybe in parts has been answered, but not really, because Catholic Church has a very particular view, right? And if you will look at 100 years, you might get one answer. But if you look at millennium, humans haven't doing the same thing we've been doing in slightly different variations, but largely we haven't. The domination, control of the future, and overpower, we haven't really changed. And I wonder, the artificial intelligence aspect of the conversation being dominated by humans, one should ask, what is it to be human? And then what is the purpose of humans on Earth? So, all right, AI can solve different, and I'm not against AI, but AI can solve different things. Great, it can. Also the things that we actually make happen. How long are we going to be doing things in the name of the progress, and what's the purpose of the progress? Not that I'm advocating gates for, but I don't think we're having those conversations, because to your point, if we go through all these layers, fine, we can maybe address some of the questions at the consumer user level, at the organizational level, at the country level, which is currently is domination through AI. What the heck are we all doing? Like, where does this end? And then in the end, somewhere we decide that we're going to give away our agency to machines, because machines might be more superior to human thinking. I think fundamentally flawed logic, no? And I don't know where we're having those conversations.
So I agree with your question. So I just want to mirror back and bring it back into the center. So I agree with that question. What does it mean to be human? And I think that's a very fundamental question we should be thinking about.
I think we haven't heard from you yet.
So to bring your point into more practical terms, so who is organizing for us when it comes to ethics? So the Catholic Church has their own view of what it means to be human. OpenAI has their own view of what it means to be human. They're more focused on the productivity part of it. What are all the other definitions? And if we are all, to your point, just being individual creators, is that enough momentum collectively to challenge some of these forces that we're trying to challenge, like some of the stuff that people in chat have said? I don't think it is, unless we have some type of organizing binding force. But again, what does that look like, and what does its philosophy look like? So what does it mean to counter that with humanistic values? And that's exactly what the Pope and the Catholic Church, in my interpretation, is trying to do. But not everybody wants to listen to the Catholic Church. So what do other versions of that look like, and how can we all collectively agree on definition and a philosophy. And it may be borrowed very heavily from what the Pope and the Catholic Church are doing. I think it will. But yeah, just to
break my moderator ethics and jump in on I think Anna, I agree with you that discussion is not being had. And just for fun, I wonder if that answer is coming from an increase of church attendance. And I don't know if that comes up in some of the circles or conversation that you have. People literally, like maybe as the pendulum swings one way about disconnect and hyper-atomization, individualism, do they vote with their feet by going to different, you're describing community orientations? I wonder if that's a funny way of answering it. It's not a discussion, it's an outcome of what they do. Maybe. Where the answer lies.
And not to take this over, but the reason why I asked the question, what does it mean to be human? Because I wonder how many of us actually sat down and answered that question, because the guys of OpenAI answered their question for themselves. They have a very specific vision of the world. I don't know, sounds like most of us probably don't agree with that vision of the world is, but you have to go back enough and look at, right, what is the fundamental they believe that worldview they carry, and they're imposing that worldview one way or another, whether consciously and unconsciously, I don't know, this is a whole entire philosophical conversation. But I stumble across this question and I keep asking, keep wondering, it's like, but you and you as a, not you, but you specifically, did you answer that question for yourself? Like, what does it mean to be human for you? And can we start having those conversations collectively rather than government of Canada coming and imposing of, this is why we're doing AI, but like, why?
So question, Giancarlo, where is the question of what it means to be human, and what's the purpose of this in Evan Solomon's portfolio?
Yeah, that's
the name drop them.
I think we're already seeing the answer to what they think it means to be human. And I'm going to use governments and large corporations. You just have to look at their behaviors. Look at their behaviors. They're telling you what it means to be human, right? And then I put on my, I don't know how many of you have kids in the room or online. Like, you put on your parent hat. And I have a very clear, I have 3 kids at home. One's going to university next year, another one's going to grade 11, another one's in elementary school, into grade 7. And I think a lot about what it is that I need to do as a parent to raise them in a world that I know is about to change. And the advice I gave to my daughter who's going to university next year is very different than my son. And my son in grade 7, I'm preparing him for a world without work. There is a chance that he might not be working. Maybe 20% of the world. If you look at Davos, Switzerland, it was an interesting World Economic Forum, opinions about that group. They did an interesting study where they looked at 4 possible ways that the world kind of ends up based on 2 variables. So I look for simplistic models. So take this simplistic model. So one is, how quickly will AI continue to evolve? So look at the pace of how AI is evolving today. So it can continue at today's pace or it can continue on. Then look at how well society is able to adapt to what's happening with the disruptions of AI. And we either adapt well or we don't adapt well. And when you do that, you take economists that then say, well, what happens to the world in these 4 different iterations, right? And it paints a picture of where we might be headed, right? So as a father, I'm thinking, what does it mean to be human for my son? And of course, from a faith-based lens, the Catholics, we're not here for this, or we're here for this. What we do here matters, right? And it's not about work and what you have and what you do. It's about how you treat others and how you treat yourself, right? So there's a faith-based lens to as an individual person, I think, would answer that question, whether you're religious or not. I think you have your own perspective what that means. If you're a parent, and I've asked the question, like, what do you want for your kids? I've asked that question, I think, for about 12 years. And it's fascinating how parents all around the world answer that question. It's not about productivity gain. It's the opposite of what governments and companies showing us the behaviors of what it means to be human. I think the average parent, when they want for their kids to live a fulfilled life, is exactly there. So what does it mean to be fulfilled? And it's not about having stuff. It's not about having more. It's finding joy, inner peace, connectivity with other. The best one I think I heard was the parent said, I want my child to know what it means to love and to be loved. Right? More the humanistic side of things. So I think where the world is going to start, I'm not sure how it's going to manifest itself, that dissonance between how maybe the economist and the commercialized view is defining what it means to be human, is going to be clashing with humanity's lens about what is it mean for me to feel like I'm living a fulfilled life.
Just want to say one more thing. So it's just because it's so like right, you're highlighting the same. So we had just had this Vanity Conversations conference, and our group converged as a group on a statement that says, for the world today, we have huge concern. We all see it in our group, in the group that we had, and it was values redefined from what the market economy prioritizes as value to what makes a life and society worth living.
Ask that across 6 different nations, and you get the answers one dominate over the other one. It's not a good system value either, right? Which is what you're gonna get.
Sorry, can you clarify your argument?
Think about it after.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna.
Let's hear from some voices. Yourself, and then Peter. Peter, you want to jump in? Did I see your hand?
Oh, sure. Okay.
And then I know there's some folks online. I'll come back.
Yeah, I'm finding myself really curious about, sorry, let me find my words. Like something about sovereignty and the way that our systems are restraining our attention, it's exploiting our attention, our dopaminergic systems, and we're more and more like non-consensually being moved by powers much bigger than ourselves. And I'm really curious about this question of God. Like why I came here today was because I'm really curious about this question of like spirit and how like spirit and God comes through us as humans, or how we're moved by something greater than us, or how we're all interconnected, including what makes up artificial intelligence. Like all of I really appreciate Vanessa Andreotti's work on hospicing modernity, and she has this really interesting framework called meta-relational AI, where she says even machines are land, our nature. All of the data, all of the water, all of the labor that goes into co-creating this thing we call AI, like it is all an extension of us in a kind of meta-relational way, as is all of the economic and ecological systems that we're embedded in. And I guess what I'm trying to feel through here, think through here is like, how do we be in right relationship with all of the ways that it's evolving? And how do we, like on this question of like what it means to be human, like how do we actually attune to what matters amidst all of the ways that these technological, economic, social, cultural, political systems are co-opting our attention and our hearts and minds and bodies? And I'm curious about what the Pope and the Catholic Church and all spiritual traditions have to say about like staying in like spiritual integrity or something, and how that, and I appreciate how the Pope and others have said like these technologies are not neutral, they imbue certain value systems, and they perpetuates almost in this karmic way. And so in Buddhism we often talk about like, and why I mentioned like when times are urgent, may we slow down. Like we often talk about just slowing down, so just enough that you have that gap between reaction and response. And I'm curious about like, how do we invite humanity to pause such that we can respond consciously, spiritually, holistically, ecologically, in a way that where we're deeply listening to all of our relations, including technological relations. And I don't know where I stand on the question of like consciousness, that we haven't really touched that here today. But just from like a systems perspective and a spiritual perspective, I really kind of would love to hear from the room if there's any shares, like how we are, relating to those questions.
Can we ask though quickly can we ask Jade quickly? You said sovereign individual. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
If you know, what does that mean to you? What did you mean by that? Rather, not what does it mean to you? What did you mean when you said sovereign? And it's okay if you don't know. We can just...
I don't fully know because I'm so aware that every part of us is codependent arising, like everything impacts us, right? But I am curious about like how much agency and consciousness and sovereignty do we really have to make full, consensual, ethical, moral choices amidst all of the ways that these systems and institutions, influence us. So when I say sovereign, I mean like in full
free will.
I don't know if I believe in free will, so I don't know how to answer that. If someone else has an answer to that question, I'd love to hear you.
Help me read because like Arjun wants in, David, and then yourself. So we have a theme of like the spiritual aspect of what is underlying this. I do value you bringing it up because it's almost like we'd be remiss to move on that. So which amongst you three are riffing on that theme? Arjun, are you in that vein? Not exactly. So we'll come back. David, you're in that vein or no?
Well, so the question is, there's history in the systems theory, which is socio-technical systems theory, when they first came out of the coal mines. And so the question was, when they first introduced the longwall machine into the coal mines, they would treat the human beings as cranks, right? And so you get a machine. So it used to be that the way you do coal mining is you send a team in, they're like a family, and I'm feeling tired that day, so Zad's going to dig a bit more, and I'm shorter than him, all sorts of stuff. So all these, the team works these things out. What happens when you bring in a machine, then all of a sudden the dynamics change because people are now part of the machine. But what happened with socio-technical systems theory was organizing around the autonomy and having autonomous work groups. Now, the question that you're asking, and it hasn't come up here, is what is your system of interest? So people are focused sometimes on the human being, but it's like human being with a machine. So for people that are concerned about this, about AI, I like to bring in, we're in an art school, electronic music. So we brought in all these electronic instruments, all the people playing strings go, oh, we're out of jobs, we're gonna panic, the machines are taking over. The Who start playing stuff, it's like, so.
And coincidentally scream Judas at Bob Dylan.
Oh yeah, exactly. Electric car. So we're kind of doing that same thing again. But the question would be, are you going to play in a band that's an acoustic band, which you could still do, or are you going to play in an electric band?
Is that the question? No, there is. I mean, because like that framing doesn't sit well with this framing that says this is the most exponential shift we actually have to try to, from a paradigm perspective, get our heads around. And the question of like, what does it mean to be human and sovereignty and autonomy and all of this? Like, if one of the major use cases, like your point is really valid, and I think like it's another example would be the word computer and what it originally was used for. We just made people part of the machine, right? Yeah. So I totally take the point, but the piece about like so many people using generative chatbots to try to figure out their experience day to day as they're journaling through their life. I think there are like fundamental questions about personhood in our culture that are also in play. And so around spirit and God, like when a person with a voice from a paradigm says, okay, I'm releasing an encyclical and I'm going to frame up like what it means for the church to be closer to humanity and the structures, and we are the leaven and the bread and all of this stuff, right? Like from a systems thinking perspective, if we're looking for feedback loops, and we're thinking about like the metabolizing of the action as part of a dynamic system, like what are we looking at across all those layers you mentioned? Like what is the relationship between the individual's purchase on the question of personhood in the discourse?
But let's go back to the original analogy, which was Tower of Babel and building a wall. You're not building that wall alone. You're not building that wall alone.
Yep.
right?
Which is why the discursive capture is such a critical political question. Because if we say, hey, stop saying this is the era of this, before we look at all of our voices on what this era is, right? If we never have that conversation, then we all are opted in to the era of whoever has the most power to define what that means. So yeah, of course we're all building the wall together, but like, should we be?
Well, but there's a choice there. So I'll take my concrete example, which is I'm spending almost all my time on a Chinese AI. What's my logic behind that? I'm actually in Chinese philosophy. There's all this Chinese text that's inside the Chinese firewall that the Western AIs have no concept of. So it's like, I'm just gonna spend my time over there because they have access to all the Western stuff. But then people go, oh, it's a Chinese AI.
No, but my thinking is like, that's an incredibly profound political action. Like,
Yes,
you
it
as
is.
a person recognize that there's currency and purchase on the future of discourse existing in a certain data store that doesn't exist over here.
Yes.
And you're able to actually take a political action as a user through that I wouldn't be able to take in the same way, right?
Who speaks English?
Yeah.
You really get Chinese. I don't speak Chinese. Read it.
But there's one framing of your story that's a purely consumer-based framing, which is just like, this is all part of the narrative of the future of AI, and you just found another use case as a tool. But there's another framing that's not a consumer framing. This has deep political implications on culture and discourse.
But all technology does.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think that's the systems thinking question, especially with regards to the encyclical.
Don't look at me, I don't know. I feel like you want to jump in.
Or the comments in the chat that is like this is crazy.
Okay,
yeah.
Oh yeah, guitars and synthesizers aren't streaming with stolen data.
We'll go in, then we'll go to Sebastian, and then to be honest, we are going overtime. I can sense that we will go overtime. Let's like 25, and then.
Let's go drink and go overtime.
No, I want to jump on the holistic spirituality, and because that's very important. And so I try to learn more about it, but my understanding we shift to a different era. So that's mean we supposed to be, or we supposed to become more aware about first ourselves, but also about our environment. And from my observation, because I went for more than 3 years overseas, especially in Africa, and I saw a different type of mindset, which is closer to the Aboriginal mindset, which is close to the nature, close to the togetherness, close to, and we're lacking that. And we're going to an extreme to something we don't have any control, but we also losing what making us human, which is being self-aware about ourselves and also about the environment. And so for me, we need to transform how we think. We need to transform how we relate to each other. Because before, we have to keep the balance. And this balance was not as strong when you have the Industrial Revolution, because at that time, they keep having as well this connection with the earth, with the different elements. But right now, we are so far from where we had the balance. And now we need to go back to something to rebuild a certain way of balancing how we feel, how we are aware about our being, what we do, and also what we want to achieve. And so that's why what you said is really pertinent.
I don't want to, because I want you.
I haven't given the online people some love in a long time. So Sebastian, why don't you go ahead?
Am I audible now?
Yeah, you can go on 5%.
So I think kind of like futures thinking, it depends on where you stand, right? The question is not if the technology is useful or not, is if you benefit from it or not. So, right, like David is getting a benefit from talking to this Chinese AI and understanding medicine from a different perspective, right? that's great, right? On the other side of the world, there's a medical practitioner that doesn't have maybe money because David is not paying them anymore, right? So that person probably is against AI. So it's creating these kind of divisions. If you use AI and you benefit from it, then you support it. If you're losing your job and you can't even pay for the tokens, then you're against it. And then we're talking about spirituality, and I've kind of been thinking that what if AI is a demonic entity that is speaking to us, right? And it's not actually a good thing, but it's actually exposing the biases and the most evil things of society, because it contains all of our biases, right? Like every time I use it, I can see all of these errors come up, right? So it's kind of like a trickster. If you ask it to teach you something new, it pretends that it knows, and it presents it in a way that seems convincing enough for you to believe it. But if you ask it something that you know a lot about, then you very quickly realize how most of it is bullshit. So, I don't know. It's a very, we're on the edge of a knife. We could use it for good, but we're using it for wealth extraction and control and domination, right? Because it's built under a capitalist model.
Sparks the thought. Thank you for sharing, Sebastian. It sparks the thought about Islamic eschatology or end of times and the role some people actually. Not saying like, oh, there's strong views about AI and television and radio and printing press and the form. You can keep going backwards. Checking the time, checking where we are. Are you going to say a piece? That's right. No problem. No problem. Thank you for that. So why don't you go with that, and then we'll kind of. Sure. I have one thought I'm going to self-save, so throw it at the end.
So my question is not a faith-based question. So my question is, as you look at your usage of AI, how has that changed your personality? I'll give an example. I'm an introvert. I prefer to do everything on my phone. I don't really like asking people for help, because maybe like as an introvert, I just talk to people who I know, and I don't want to speak to strangers. I'll give a good example. Yesterday I was in Kitchener. So I think it's just my second visit to Kitchener. And I wanted to visit Aldershot from Kitchener. So I was using Google's AI mode, and it said that if I walk 20 minutes north, there is a Go bus that travels directly from Kitchener to Aldershot. It was around 12:15 yesterday afternoon, and I walked for 25 minutes to the bus stop because Google AI gave me the instruction. I reached there and I waited. And I think if you travel regularly by Go, at the Go bus stop, you can text that bus stop number and it gives you an ETA. I texted and I got a message saying that there's no data available for this trip. So I thought maybe, this stop is not like frequently used. I waited for another 10 minutes and then I saw a human. So I was like, okay, maybe should I or should I not? Finally, I had the courage to ask him, are you waiting for the Go bus? And he said no. And said, no, I'm waiting for this Go bus 17, like when would it arrive? And he said, this Go bus does not run on weekends. And it was like big bummer for me. But I think the key takeaway for me was that like my introversion and my focus to trust AI is probably leading me to a false bubble where I think I can get more quick, efficient data quickly, which is not really good. So I'm just curious, I'm just offering this question to the group in terms of like, have you ever seen going into a path of where, okay, let me not talk to people, let me get some responses. I know AI is hallucinating, but I can still get started. Is that like a false bubble that you're getting into? If so, what have you done to come back to reality?
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Before we go to that question.
Sure.
Because otherwise, when we go to that, we will leave.
Okay, but you're on a timer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just want to correct what Anna said, what you said, and what, Horace just said. So, Anna, you said, yeah, we've been now centuries, but we still keep acting the same way. And then, like, from my experience, I've been in capitalistic environments for the last 20 years. Yes, well, yes, sure. Millennia. We haven't yet evolved, I feel. So, and it's the same. And I just want to add another point to yours is that, so 20 years in capitalistic societies and like 20 years in communist societies. So Adam Smith, Karl Marx, they were ideologically completely opposite, yet still human nature always proved to be still human nature. And then what you asked was, sorry, 1 second. It's very important. How do we be in the right relationship in all of the ways the things around us are evolving? And Aura said transformation, right? So I just want to again, and I know I have huge conviction. I'm very passionate, and even though I'm Asian, I look like an Italian. So anyways, so I'm not imposing my passion on you. I just want to clarify in the Canadian environment. I'm just very passionate about it myself. So I believe this is a time for us to really step up and transform. And then that part, what Aura said and what you asked, is exactly fitting into that. So we have 5 bodies. We've been really honoring only one body, which is the mental mind and the ego and the mental ego. How do we fall into rest of our bodies? So we actually transform to deal with all these highly complex, things like climate change and AI. And now they're like multiple, and we did mention meta crisis. So they're multiple and they're multiplying and they're big, all of them, not something small. So, and I'm going to just leave.
I'm going to connect what you were saying to your question with the question. What I'm hearing in this is, and I don't know if I fully agree that we've actually managed mentally to advance ourselves as a species, but I think what I was hearing in your example, a lot questions around how are we thinking and what our cognitive process is, because I have noticed the metacognition, right? You've also explored how you think about certain things, and eventually you reach out to a human. And I wonder if that's kind of the place where we also need to spend a little bit of time in, because maybe not all of us are in the same way if we think about the 5 ranks of the thinking. We haven't really moved through all those ways the thinking actually occurs at the same level. And therefore, we're tapping into AI as a fix to something that we actually need to develop. And if we develop that, maybe you won't become more extrovert. Maybe you don't need to. I would argue you don't need to. But it's that kind of thinking would get you to the right spaces sooner. Maybe on not a small example of the bus, but on a bigger civilizational scale of why are we giving away our thinking to a machine, which is a mirror of what we think. Partial mirror because Chinese stuff is not there.
I just want to respect everyone's time, so we are at 8:25. But if we go over a little bit, it's fine, but we should start winding down. There was a lot of things that Tim had put in earlier in the chat that I missed. Not I missed, but it's up there as well. I don't know, David, if it's worth getting, not now, I mean later, if people want it, they can access the chats for those that attended. But Tim's latest piece that he's recommending Josiah Royce and his concept of loyalty to loyalty and related thought, communities of grace. You can't see it all here, but he speaks a lot, so maybe we can circulate that. Thank you, Tim. One of the things that I just want to share really quickly in closing off, and then we'll let you have the final word, Giancarlo, is in the systems world. Even recently at the problematic dialogue, we were talking about problem seeking. So sometimes in the systems world, you're not trying to find the answer yet. You're trying to figure out different framings. And this theme came up about the spirituality, and Anna, you gave it a word quite early on about worldviews. And I just wonder, like, it is interesting, the AI topic itself for a systems thinker naturally then evokes the question of worldview seeking. Like, you're trying to go out and seek multiple worldviews about how are people understanding it. And I think when you mentioned like OpenAI or others have, made a declaration, or same thing with the political class have made not a declaration, but it's implied. And I think this encyclical is a declaration of another worldview that is contributing to that. So that's how I see this intersection. So I guess the final question, Giancarlo, is as systems thinkers, what can we learn from the encyclical? You don't have to answer that up. You can thematically wrap that any way you'd like.
Yeah, there's so many sentiments that I felt in the room. I think I think we go back to what do we know is true about communities that are around us in our own communities, but also other communities that look very different. We represent about 2% of the population, like us in this community we're sitting right now. There's a reality to that I think we're not paying attention to, right? So there's two parts to this. One is, what do we do as system thinkers, and what do system thinkers globally need to do, right? And I think it's pay attention to what you said, which is very true, which is some of us are being guided, beliefs or behaviors are shaped by something that we don't really know is actually shaping us right now. And the average, I'm going to say the average person is not aware of this. So if we could all, when I say all, I mean globally, collectively align on one thing, which is we don't, actually I'll rewind before I say this. And it goes back to what does it mean to be human? But what would be the common denominator if everybody had to get into a room and align on one thing that we want for the world? What would come out if we did that exercise? I think it comes down to it's, and I think it comes down to it's what a parent wants for their child, but they want for themselves, right? They didn't have it, so I want my kids to have it, right? So there's selfishness in there. And he mentioned did some work with Aboriginal communities, and they have this concept called minnow-pepitestimony, which is the good life, which is we're all on this journey of discovery. And in this journey of discovery, it's for what purpose? To better know ourselves. To better know ourselves in relation to the person that we're sitting beside. And to better know ourselves in relation to the world and the space that we breathe. And so every interaction that we have while we're here, whether you believe this is it or not, is to journey through life to better encounter this. And if we all sat in a room collectively to ask, well, what do we want for ourselves? And if we can align on that, then the question is, how do we get our systems thinkers to make that a reality? So I think the call globally is, how do systems thinkers understand the gravity and the urgency of what they're actually, like, if you chose that field, there's an urgency of the world needing you to take action now. And for us in this room, and we have, if you heard the different lenses that we all take, like, what do we do with that kind of expertise that's very unique, whether it's for your own kind of personal journeys, right? Or for the organizations or the systems that we're connected to, or for communities we're about to engage in a conversation. She's mentioning a dialogue she's going to have about a grief with AI, right? Like, what could we do with that insight that helps humanity bring us in a path or direction that we can all feel good about? So I hope I answered your question.
Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you everyone online. There's a lot of richness in the text, so we do have access to it. We'll try to share that for those that attended as well. Next month, we'll go back to some synthesis map presentations after this check with the team. yeah, I'll keep everyone posted. And afterwards, I'll hand it to David.
The restaurant suggestion for today is Pho Ngoc Yen, a Vietnamese restaurant at 350 Adelaide. Walk 3 blocks on Richmond Street, 3 lights to Peter Street, turn left, and then turn right. It should be on the corner. I haven't been there before. Find it. Very informative.
Yeah. What's the address again?
350 Adelaide.
350 Adelaide.
But three lights, 1 block down is Adelaide.
Yeah, so for anyone who wants to join and continue the conversation, that's what that'll be. I can't make it myself, but it's time. Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the topic.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Very interesting. And I was really interested.
Sure. Yes, I'm just thinking about it. Yeah, that's what I thought.
What's interesting. So we should actually move everything back. We should actually bring the table back to the table for the UK.
Genuine.
So that's in the UK.
I feel like you were doing all the mapping during the session. I can.
That's a really good question. Thank you.
I appreciate what you said when you were setting up your intro. You're like, yeah, let's do this. I just. I'm curious to hear, are you coming up with it or you did that? I'll go for a little bit. I have a meeting in about 2 hours, so. Sorry? I'm working with an organization, and one of the organizations I worked with, the principal years ago, and recently doing a project I thought about doing the S5 program.
Guessing you have like
No, I mean, especially like as a hybrid designer or service designer, and change. Yeah, so it's like I wear a lot of different hats.
It's like other games.
Yeah, I was really
But no, I didn't go to school for in STEM.
It's not you.
As a teacher, some of it wasn't too bad, and I'm still learning. Like I'm a lifelong learner. I really went to school for music. I mean, there's actually parallels. Yes. There we go. How are you? Yes, yeah, that's the one with the 55 minutes. Yes, it's on Friday.
That was recently.
It's like a hobby actually.
I know.
Notice that, and I got to flag
Yes, the tech side on that.
And if you're but it's very well.
They're setting a pattern.
I didn't take it seriously.
Yeah.
Trying to pick it up. Guy, there's possible. Yeah, but I think it'd be really cool to do like degree music.
That's every single tenure that happens. 10 people, 50 people.
I mean, still have a couple more decades left.
Just make sense. That was kind of, they're all something that like disposal sites.
You have time to share it now?
It was two.
Actually, I wanna.
Two of the activists.
Also too. It's really, I've seen you at these events before, but I don't know if we've actually met. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
And it made, you know what it made me?
Things I was thinking about with respect to AI is that a lot of people my age are totally left behind. And sometimes they have to be able to access computers and to access